Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadari. Can you play cartoons? Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Hare Krishna.
Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajacharya Astotra Satta Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavani Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Jamuna Devi Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarane Trinadapi Sunichena Tarar Iva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Harir Nama Harir Nama Harir Nama Iva Kivalam Kalau Nastyeva 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 Gatir Anyata Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for allowing me this privilege of speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. Before I begin, I would like to offer my obeisances to all the devotees online and in the temple room. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha,
Pasanubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Today, we are studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 17, verse 13. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Te Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Yatra Deva Pataya Svai Gananayakaya Vihita Maharhana Sarartu Kusuma Stabaka Falakisala Sriya Namyamana Vitapa Lata Vitabibir Upashumbha Mana Ruchira Kana Nashra Mayatana Varshagiri Dronishu Tata Chamala Jalashayeshu Vikacha Vividha Navavana Ruhamoda Mudita Rajahamsa Jalakukuta Karandava Sarasa Chakravakadibir Madhukara Nikara Kritibir Upakujiteshu Jala Kridadibir Vichitra Vinodai Sulalita Sura Sundarinang Kama Kalila Vilasa Hasalila Valoka Krishna Mano Drishtaya Svayang Virahanti. These are the synonyms for this verse. Yatraha, in those 8 tracts of land. Deva Pataya, the lords of the demigods, such as Lord Indra. Swai, by their own respective. Gana Nayakai, leaders of the servants. Vihita, furnished with. Maha Arhana, valuable gifts such as sandalwood pulp and garlands. Sarva Ritu, in all seasons. Kusama Stabaka, of bunches of flowers. Phala, of fruits. Kisalaya Sriya, by the opulences of shoots. Anamyamana, being bent down. Vitapa, whose branches. Lata, and creepers. Vitabibi, by many trees. Upashumbamana, being fully decorated. Ruchira, beautiful. Kanana, gardens. Ashrama Ayatana, and many hermitages. Varshagiri Dronishu, the valleys between the mountains designating the borders of the tracts of land. Tata, as well as. Cha, also. Amala Jala Ashayeshu, in lakes with clear water. Vikacha, just fructified. Vividha, varieties. Nava Vanaruha Amoda, by the fragrance of lotus flowers. Mudita, enthused. Rajahangsa, great swans. Jalakukuta, waterfowl. Karandava, aquatic birds called Karandavas. Sarasa, cranes. Chakravaka Adabihi, by birds known as Chakravakas and so on. Madhukara Nikara Akritibihi, by the bumblebees. upakujiteshu, which were made to resound. Jalakrida adabihi, such as water sports. Vichitra, various. Vinodai, by pastimes. Su lalita, attractive. Sura sundari nam, of the women of the demigods. Kama, from lust. Kalila, born. Vilasa, pastimes. Hasa, smiling. Lila avaloka, by playful glances. Krishna manaha, whose minds are attracted. Drishtayaha, and whose vision is attracted. Svairam, very freely. Viharanti, engage in sportive enjoyment. Translation: in each of those tracts of land, there are many gardens filled with flowers and fruits according to the season. And there are beautifully decorated hermitages as well. Between the great mountains demarcating the borders of those lands lie enormous lakes of clear water filled with newly grown lotus flowers. Aquatic birds such as swans, ducks, water chickens, and cranes become greatly excited by the fragrance of lotus flowers, and the charming sound of bumblebees fills the air. The inhabitants of those lands are important leaders among the demigods. Always attended by their respective servants, they enjoy life in gardens alongside the lakes. In this pleasing situation, the wives of the demigods smile playfully at their husbands and look upon them with lusty desires. All the demigods and their wives are constantly supplied with sandalwood pulp and flower garlands by their servants. In this way, all the residents of the 8 heavenly Barshas enjoy, attracted by the activities of the opposite sex. Purport by the ISKCON founder Acharya, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Here is a description of the lower heavenly planets. The inhabitants of those planets enjoy life in a pleasing atmosphere of clear lakes filled with newly grown lotus flowers and gardens filled with fruits, flowers, various kinds of birds, and humming bees. In that atmosphere, they enjoy life with their very beautiful wives, who are always sexually stimulated. Nonetheless, they are all devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as will be explained in subsequent verses. The inhabitants of this earth also desire such heavenly enjoyment, but when they somehow or other achieve imitation pleasures like sex and intoxication, they completely forget the service of the Supreme Lord. In the heavenly planets, however, all the residents enjoy superior sense gratification. They never forget their positions as eternal servants of the Supreme Being. So, before I speak any further, I would first of all like to glorify Srimad Bhagavatam with the following excerpts. Srila Sanatan Goswami glorified Lord Chaitanya in the following way. My dear Lord, you are the original speaker of the Bhagavatam. You therefore know its real import. But for you, no one can understand the confidential meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya then replied, why are you glorifying me personally? You should understand the transcendental position of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why don't you consider this important point? Srimad Bhagavatam is as great as Krishna, the Supreme Lord and shelter of everything. In each and every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and in each and every syllable, there are various meanings. So I'd like to repeat that because I find that personally very, very instructive. I'll repeat it. In each and every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and in each and every syllable, there are various meanings. The form of Srimad Bhagavatam is given in questions and answers. Therefore, the conclusion is established. By hearing these questions and answers, one is highly astonished. Also, in glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya once informed Prakashananda Saraswati, one's relationship with the Lord, sambandha, activities in devotional service, abhideya, and the attainment of the highest goal of life, love of Godhead, prayojana, are the subject matters of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sarva Vede Tihasanam Sarang Sarang Samudritam. The essence of all Vedic literature and all histories has been collected in Srimad Bhagavatam. And finally, Lord Chaitanya once instructed Sarvabhauma Bhatta Acharya, Bhagavan Sambandha Bhakti Abhideha Hoy, Prema Prayojana Vedetina Vastu Kai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the central point of all relationships. Acting in devotional service to Him is one's real occupation, and the attainment of love of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. These three subject matters are described in the Vedic literature. So that finishes my Bhagavat Mahatmyam. So I went through various purports and excerpts, and I have compiled the following in order to help us understand today's verse. Among the 10 subjects described throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, the 5th subject is Utayaha, impetus for activity. Utaya karma vasana. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Uti is the urge for creation or initiative power, which is the cause of all inventions, according to the necessities of time, space, and objects. In the 5th canto, it is seen how the Lord is worshipped in different planets in his different forms, even now, and how he is worshipped in different temples of this earth also. This will be depicted in the next 2 chapters of this 5th canto. So now, I found this excerpt from today's verse, the focus of my message for today. So the final statements of today's prose verse. The Chitra Vinodai Sulalita Sura Sundarinam Kama Kalila Vilasa Hasalila Valoka Krishtamano Drishtayaha Svairang Viharanti. In this pleasing situation, the wives of the demigods smile playfully at their husbands and look upon them with lusty desires. All the demigods and their wives are constantly supplied with sandalwood pulp and flower garlands by their servants. In this way, all the residents of the 8 heavenly varshas enjoy, attracted by the activities of the opposite sex. So, previous to today's verse, we heard in this very same chapter, quote, Among the 9 Varshas, the tract of land known as Bharata Varsha is understood to be the field of fruitive activities. Learned scholars and saintly persons declare the other 8 Varshas to be meant for very highly elevated pious persons. After returning from the heavenly planets, they enjoyed the remaining results of their pious activities in these 8 earthly Varshas. In these 8 Varshas, or tracts of land, human beings live 10,000 years according to earthly calculations. All the inhabitants are almost like demigods. They have the bodily strength of 10,000 elephants. Indeed, their bodies are as sturdy as thunderbolts. The youthful duration of their lives is very pleasing, and both men and women enjoy sexual union with great pleasure for a long time. And after years of sensual pleasure, when a balance of 1 year of life remains, the wife conceives a child. Thus, the standard of pleasure for the residents of these heavenly regions is exactly like that of the human beings who lived during Treta Yuga. So I wanted to put that in there so that we get more of a context in relationship to today's verse. Already in the 5th canto, we heard from Rishabhadev. Nayang deho deha bhajang niraloke, kashtan kaman arhate vid bhujanye, tapo divyang putraka yena satvang, shudyed yasmad brahma saukyam to anantam. My dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material bodies in this world, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for dogs and hogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified, and when one attains this position, one attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. Mahat sevang dwaram ahur vimuktes, tomo dwarang yoshitang sangi sangam, mahankaste samachitta prashanta vimanyava suhrida sadavo ye. It is the verdict of all Shastras and great personalities that service to a pure devotee is the path of liberation. By contrast, association with materialistic persons who are attached to material enjoyment and woman is the path of darkness. Those who are actually devotees are broad-minded, equal to everyone, and very peaceful. They never become angry, and they are friendly to all living entities. Yeva maishe krita sauridartha, janeshu dehambara vartikeshu, griheshu jayatmaja rati mastu, napriti yukta yavad artashcha loke. Those who are interested in reviving Krishna consciousness and increasing their love of Godhead do not like to do anything that is not related to Krishna. They are not interested in mingling with people who are busy maintaining their bodies, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They are not attached to their homes, although they may be householders, nor are they attached to wives, children, friends, or wealth. At the same time, they are not indifferent to the execution of their duties. Such people are interested in collecting only enough money to keep the body and soul together. Nunang pramattak kurute vikarma yad indriya pritaya aprinoti nasadu manye yata atmano yam asan apiklesha da asa deha. When a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, one certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. One does not know that due to one's past misdeeds, one has already received a body which, although temporary, is the cause of one's misery. Actually, the living entity should not have taken on a material body, but one has been awarded the material body for sense gratification. Therefore, I think it not befitting an intelligent man to involve himself again in the activities of sense gratification, by which he perpetually gets material bodies one after another. Parabhavastavad abhudha jato yavan jigyasata atmatattvam yavat kriyastavad idang manovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. As long as one does not inquire about the spiritual values of life, one is defeated and subjected to miseries arising from ignorance. Be it sinful or pious, karma has its resultant actions. If a person is engaged in any kind of karma, one's mind is called karmatmaka, colored with fruitive activity. As long as the mind is impure, consciousness is unclear. And as long as one is absorbed in fruitive activity, one has to accept a material body. Ebang manakarma vashang prayunkte avidya yatmani upadiyamane pritirna yavan maivasudeve namuchyate deha yogena tavat. When the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, one does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and one's mind is subjugated to fruitive activities. Therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudeva, who is none other than myself, one is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. Yada napashyati ayata guneham svarte pramattak sahasa vipaschit gatasmritir vindati tatra tapan asadya maitunyam agaram agya. Even though one may be very learned and wise, one is mad if one does not understand that the endeavor for sense gratification is a useless waste of time. I would like to repeat that just for my own edification. Even though one may be very learned and wise, one is mad if one does not understand that the endeavor for sense gratification is a useless waste of time. Being forgetful of one's own interest, one tries to be happy in the material world, centering one's interest around one's home, which is based on sexual intercourse and which brings one all kinds of material miseries. In this way, one is no better than a foolish animal. Pung sastriya maituni bhavam itang tayor mitho hridaya grantham ahu ato grihakshetra sutapta vittayar janasya mahoyam ahang mameti. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to one's body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine. Yada mano hridaya grantir asya karmanu badho drida ashlateta tadajana samparivartate smad muktaparang yati atihaya hetu. When the strong knot in the heart of a person implicated in material life due to the results of past action is slackened, one turns away from one's attachment to home, wife, and children. In this way, one gives up the basic principle of illusion, I and mine, and becomes liberated. Thus, one goes to the transcendental world. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is my presentation. So now, if there are any questions on today's subject matter, I will attempt to answer.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful class. Prabhu, these 8 varshas, they are different planets, is it? Or
Planets?
I mean, the 8, the different varshas. We know, like
I don't know if I don't think they're planets. They're regions that are part of the Bhumandala system. So I don't consider them planets. They're part, just like Bharatavarsha is sometimes referred to as India, or sometimes Bharatavarsha refers to Earth. But these other varshas, my understanding is that they are not planets, but another dimension or different region, unless somebody has a better understanding. That is my understanding. Are there any senior god brothers there in the temple room who can?
So the devotional, I mean, their worship, is it like they worship Krishna, or how do they worship or perform devotional service?
So in the next 2 chapters, there will be a series of prayers offered by the leading personality of these 8 varshas, and it will be indicated who they worship. For instance, on one varsha, they worship Lord Ramachandra. On another varsha, they worship Lord Nisringa, Lord Kurma. So you will hear in the next 2 chapters prayers offered by leading personalities worshiping specific deities on these 8 varshas. So make sure you attend every class.
Thank you, Prabhu.
No, those 2 chapters I've used quite a lot in preaching over the years, because they're very nice prayers. Especially, we will hear the prayers of Hanuman worshiping Lord Ramachandra. That section is very nice. And we will also hear prayers by Prahlad Maharaj worshiping Lord Nisringa. Of course, his appearance day is in 1 week. So like that, very nice prayers in the next 2 chapters.
Jai Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Does Balaram have anything?
Hare Krishna.
Before you ask your question, Balaram,
Yes.
I want to say that when you were leading your kirtan, I thought it was Dravida because
Mm.
I kept saying, wait, where's Dravida? But it was you singing the kirtan, right?
Yeah.
That is amazing. You sound just like Dravida in your kirtan. It's astounding. It just shows the power of hearing because you have heard year after year after year. Now you sound like him.
Yeah.
I hope you take that as a compliment.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. He has some type of throat, strep throat type going on.
Oh,
So that's why he's yeah, he's not singing as much these days, and he's also doing, I think he's doing his Vyasa Puja
work. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's good because that means it's time for this next generation to step up and take over. Yes.
Yeah, so so you're mentioning Rishabhadev's teachings, this Karmatmakam Yena Sharira Bandha, the desire for sense gratification is not given up, then this is the result of, this is the by not giving up the desires for sense gratification, one, continues in their misery, gets another material body, and so on. So maybe you could just comment on this idea of getting a higher taste or higher pleasure in Krishna consciousness, because it's not automatic that, okay, well, one is joined the Hare Krishna movement or one's living in the temple, then automatically they're going to get a higher taste. They have to, strive for it. So maybe you could just comment on getting a taste for the holy name, getting a taste for, reading, getting a taste for hearing. Maybe you could comment on that.
I would be happy to attempt that. So yes, you have brought about a very fundamental principle. Parang drisva nivartate. One has to get the higher taste. Now, as soon as one engages in any one or more of the 9 processes of bhakti, automatically you are getting a higher taste, because at the time spent engaged in devotional service, you're not engaged in sense gratification. So I was just explaining this the other day to one of my student preachers in Santiago, Chile. And I was explaining that it's like a balance or a seesaw, or if you've sometimes seen a balance where you put weight on one side and the other side goes up. So it cannot be that my spiritual taste is increasing and simultaneously my material taste is increasing. No, either one is increasing and one is decreasing. So the best policy is to engage actively in as much devotional service every day. Of course, it begins in the morning with chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But besides chanting, there is also service, manual labor to push on this movement. Prabhupada calls it practical samadhi, that when you're fully engaged, 100% day after day in practical service, and Prabhupada even mentions in the 10th canto, centered around book distribution. He even mentions that point. So I have to be engaged, because as soon as I'm not engaged in 1, 2, 3, or 9 processes of the devotional service, then immediately sense gratification ushers in. Because we learn from Bhagavad Gita, and also from Krishna book, the soul is always active. Even while we're sleeping, not that the soul sleeps, no. The soul is always active. As Prabhupada writes, either in the liberated state or the conditioned state. So since the soul is always active, one has to consciously make the point, has to be aware that I must always be engaged in at least one item of devotional service. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends the first two processes are the essential ones, hearing and chanting. Harer nama eva kevalam, kirtaniya sadahari. So that is the basic principle of this Bhakti Yoga as given to us by Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada. So the default position is I should always be engaged in hearing and chanting. Even while I'm doing so many different activities, still the hearing and chanting should be going on. The best example is the example of the gopis. That even though the gopis were engaged in household duties, milking cows, taking care of children, serving the husbands, and doing so many practical things from sunrise to sunset and beyond, still internally the gopis were always thinking and remembering Krishna. So Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that there is this verse spoken by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he's instructing Sanatana Goswami that the basic regulative principle is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada writes clearly that the first order of the spiritual master is to chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Otherwise, Prabhupada writes, it will not be possible to remember Krishna throughout the day. And then Prabhupada writes in the purport that he has given us specific services. And then he mentions book distribution, enlisting life members, deity worship. Prabhupada has given us so much activities that we can do, but these activities are meant to help us always remember Krishna and never forget him, because that is the foundational regulative principle. So I have to make it a point to consciously try to remember Krishna and think of Krishna and never forget him, even while I'm doing my work. So Prabhupada writes there that naturally, if one is going out to distribute one of the books, automatically he has to remember Krishna. Or Prabhupada says, if one is going to enlist a life member, there has to be talk of Krishna, remembrance of Krishna. Now, let's go more back to your question about the higher taste. So Rupa Goswami points out that in the beginning, although the holy name of Krishna is the sweetest of the sweetest of the sweetest thing, still in the beginning, we have not yet developed a taste. We cannot relish it very much. So many of us, when we start out, chanting on the beads is like a chore. But that's only because we have not developed that taste. And the reason we have not developed the taste is because we have a disease. And that disease is called ignorance. Or attachment to material sense gratification, or that was mentioned in today's readings that I gave, the concept of I and mind, the bodily concept of life. These things prevent me from actually tasting the very sweetness. But here's the thing. You don't have to do anything extraneous. So in Rupa Goswami's verse, he says it is just like jaundice, the condition of avidya or ignorance of the conditioned soul is just like the disease jaundice. And Prabhupada mentions jaundice is cured by sugar candy juice or sugarcane juice. Now, for the person with jaundice, to taste anything sweet is very, very bitter because of the disease. So the sugar candy is the sweetest thing. I have had sugarcane juice in India and in Panama. I'm sure many of you have tasted that sugarcane juice. Sometimes they put a lemon in there or ginger. It's very delicious and it's so sweet. But for the person with jaundice, he cannot taste the sweetness. It's bitter. But the person with the jaundice who has knowledge knows, no, this is the only thing that's going to cure me. So even though it's very bitter, I forcibly have to take the medicine because this is the only way I'm going to be cured. Yes, it's very bitter, nasty. But unless I take this medicine, I'm not going to get cured. So the first time, it's very, very bitter. Next time, little less bitter. Keep taking it, keep forcing it. Eventually, the disease of jaundice is cleared up. And how do you know that the jaundice is cleared? Because now you want that sugar, you're tasting it. It's so nice. Give me more, give me more, give me more. Now you know that you're cured. So in the same way, the disease of avidya, the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, can only be cured by hearing and chanting and rendering practical devotional service. So as you take this medicine, gradually, little by little, you begin to acquire a taste. If this was not true, nobody would spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years, 40 years, getting up every day, chanting 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra, hearing it. Nobody would do that unless there was some reciprocation. So this is the wonderful thing about our process. It's not pie in the sky, as John Lennon thought. John Lennon once wrote a very blasphemous song saying that Krishna consciousness is pie in the sky, as if it's some kind of phantasmagoria. He did not understand. He was a fool. Because those who actually participate in the activities of devotional service, little by little, they're getting a taste. Take it from me. I joined this movement in 1973. If I was not getting some result, if I was not getting some taste from hearing and chanting, I would not have continued more than 2 weeks. But because there is, right from the start, some reciprocation, that gives you the impetus that was mentioned, utaya, impetus. So there is fruitive impetus, and there's also transcendental uti, or utsahan, enthusiasm. This is also transcendental. And this comes from making oneself engaging day after day after day And little by little by little, you get a taste. I must have a taste. Otherwise, why do I enjoy doing preaching? Why did I agree to do this class? Why am I going to drive 50, 60 miles tomorrow to give the Sunday feast lecture there in your temple? Why? Why am I doing this? It's because somehow or other, I have gotten some taste for this preaching, for hearing and chanting. So you just have to force yourself in the beginning so that you start to get the taste. Now, one word of caution. One has to be careful about offenses, because offenses is the way that you can lose that taste. As Lord Chaitanya explains in the last chapter of the Shikshastakam prayers in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the final chapter, Antya 20, is all about the Shikshastakam prayers. And Prabhupada's translations there are different than what he usually uses in all of his purports. And the line that really hones in for me, where Lord Chaitanya says, you are so magnanimous to have freely given your holy name, but I am so unfortunate that because of offenses, I do not achieve attachment or taste for chanting. So if the next question might be, I don't know, but I'm just saying rhetorically, if the next question is, Prabhu, I've been a devotee for so many years, I still don't have a taste. Well, then this is what I must meditate on. I must be committing some offense, which is preventing me from tasting and preventing me from getting attachment. So that's why it's good to recite the 10 offenses. And even better, before chanting, you notice that before I started the class, Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Prabhupada writes, before chanting Hare Krishna mantra, one should chant this Panchatattva Maha Mantra. Why? Because it nullifies the offenses. So that is my way of responding to your question. Is that
Thank
all
you.
right?
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, in the purport, it said that in other verses, the living entities are eternal servant of Krishna. Like they never forget the eternal servant of Krishna. Then do they fall down to Bharatvarsha from those regions? Or
Okay.
go back to
So,
God?
yeah, okay, good. So first of all, one is a resident of the actual heavenly planets, and you get to stay in the heavenly planets as long as your pious bank account, your pious credits are sufficient. But I'm pretty sure it was mentioned in this chapter when the last bit of pious account is there, and then one leaves the regular heavenly planets and takes birth in these other 8 varshas, which are like heavenly planets, but they're not on the same. So your last little bit is spent in one of those 8 varshas. And then when that's used up, then you come back down to Bharata Varsha and again begin the process. Because going to the heavenly planets or going to these 8 heavenly varshas is not the goal of life. It's still material sense gratification. Now, it's godly sense gratification. So that means it's not impious. But as this is why I did this particular readings of the statements of Rishabdev, that you can continue like this for year after life after life after life, because one is still remaining on the material platform. But the goal of life is to go back home, back to Godhead, and enjoy the topmost eternal pleasure, where you don't fall down, where you live eternally in the association of Krishna or Narayan. So and Prabhupada once told us, he said, even if there's a little pinch of material desire, oh, I want to eat one more rasgulla, that prevents one from going back to Godhead. So one has to become completely detached from any kind of material sense gratification and come to the point of fully engaging in devotional service. That is sannyas. Sannyas means now I am fully engaged only in devotional service. But this stage that we're on is the practice stage. We're building up. We're working towards it little by little, getting to the stage. So yes, they can enjoy. And yes, they know, these residents know that they're the eternal servant of Krishna, but they are called sakkama devotees. Demigods are sakkama devotees. They're devotees, but they still have material desires. We want to become akkama devotees. No more material desires. The famous verse in the second canto, akama sarvakamo va mokshakama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yejeta purusha param. That yes, there is akama, pure devotees, no material desires. Sarvakama, full of all material desires. And mokshakama, those who desire liberation. But Lord Chaitanya says they too still have material desire. That desire for impersonal liberation, no, that's still a kind of material desire. So we want to become akkama, no material desire whatsoever. So, tivrena bhakti yogena, that's the line. Bhakti yogena. Be engaged in devotional service. And the word tivrena, very forceful. Perhaps you've been to India. There's a place in India called Gangotri, where the Ganga is coming out. I saw once a video, and the Ganga is coming out very, very powerful from this place. So that is how our devotional service has to come. Powerful devotional service, steady devotional service. As Krishna says, Mangchayo bicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. You have to engage in devotional service nirantara, 24/7, without any interruption. When that stage comes, Brahma Bhuyaya, you are on the same spiritual platform as Krishna. Same spiritual platform. Brahma Bhuyaya, spiritual platform. Because you are constantly engaged. So the way I look at it, as long as I'm engaged in hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, the 9 processes, while I'm doing that, I am liberated. Once I stop, bloop, I'm down again. So, chant Hare Krishna, do your service, my good friend. do your nice service for the temple for the rest of your life. Do your service and develop a taste for Krishna consciousness. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for nice class and nice answer.
Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nirantara Prabhu.
I must say, I am so honored and grateful that you gave me this opportunity, and I hope I get more opportunities, and I will see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna,
Jai.
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama
Rama
Rama, Hare Hare.
All glories to ISKCON San Diego.
Hare Krishna. Jai.
Jai.